Welcome, welcome. Good morning, everybody. Glad y'all can make it here today. Honored guest. We're pleased to have the turnout. My name is David Gonzalez. I'm the Deputy Executive Director here at TDLR, one of three. Very pleased to have everybody here at our Boiler Board Summit. This is an important part of the process, and so y'all's input and the time spent is very much appreciated. We have a couple of honored guests here. We have some of our Sunset Commission staff joining us here today. Emily, Rachel, appreciate y'all being here and the time taken. For those of y'all that don't know, our Sunset Commission reviews our agencies, makes sure that there's a reason for our agency to continue and for the programs here to continue as well. So the input that they receive as part of the Sunset review is very important. There's always opportunities to get that input. I also have the honor and opportunity to introduce our Deputy Director of Regulatory Program Management, Mr. Lee Parham.
Thank you, David. All right. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our first Boiler Rule Summit. Very first one. The summit was posted in the Texas Register as we have a quorum of our boiler board here. The summit, as well as the board meeting this afternoon, will be broadcast on the department's YouTube channel. So we have video and audio going now. So, we appreciate you taking the time to come and provide us with the feedback that we need to finalize our safe and viable proposed rules. At this time, I'll take the opportunity to introduce our boiler board members and staff. Rob Trout, Chief Boiler Inspector. He's the presiding officer of the boiler board. Norman Anderson, George Crawford, Gerald Harris, Dan Lancaster, Brian Mallon, Shannon Nestor, Bill Quisenberry, and Mark Thompson. All right, so that's our boiler board. Staff, our boiler staff, we have, our boiler staff, we have Bill Van Hook, Keith Sanford. They're our inspection specialists and regional team leads. And I also want to introduce Gloria Rodriguez and Brittany Royal, our critical and all-important support staff. They help us keep this thing rolling. I also want to thank our general counsel, attorneys Della Lindquist and Laura Pfefferly. I saw Laura earlier. Oh, there you are. So, okay, Laura and Della. They also want to thank our advisory board staff who guided and assisted us in putting this on and develop this summit and bring everybody together. We have a full day, and we're going to cover an extremely important topic. You see what will be covered here, okay, extension law history, extension rule history, and why is the change in the rules needed. We're focusing on the extension of the internal inspection intervals. As we go through the agenda, Chief Trout will provide you with a lot of information, okay, from the history of the internal inspection extension law and rules, including historical and current comparisons of the laws and rules, on to his second presentation of our proposed rules change for extension of the interval between required internal inspections. Okay? We ask that you hold your questions and comments until after Rob completes his second presentation, and at that time we'll have microphones to hand to you so you can be recorded. You should have a copy of the proposed rules. If not, they're on the table over here. I miss Tim LaRue. Tim LaRue is one of our deputy inspectors in the boiler program. So with that said, are we ready to start this? You ready?
Yeehaw.
All right. All right.
I just didn't want to walk in front.
No, that's okay, man. All right, so let's get started. I'm turning it over to Rob Trout, our Chief Boiler Inspector.
Thank you, Lee. So there's a couple things I got to do before we get into this. I actually have to do a roll call as part of housekeeping. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this real quick. So Rob Trout, present. Norm Anderson.
Present.
George Crawford.
Present.
Alan Kripe. Gerald Harris.
Present.
Brian Mullen.
Present.
Dan Lancaster.
Present.
Stuart Nestor.
Present.
Bill Quisenberry.
Present.
Mark Thompson.
Present.
Richard West. Naomi Doyle. Okay, so we do have a quorum here. We have published everything like we're supposed to, so we're in compliance, but I did want to point that out, that we do have the quorum. So this first presentation, and this is just kind of to share with everybody how the law and rules has evolved over the last several years. And when I say several years, I'm talking 57 years, okay? So I'm sure a lot of people are aware that Texas boiler law actually came into existence in 1937 when we had this real horrific accident over in London, Texas. And what happened was the school was leveled. We almost, it took out, unfortunately, almost an entire generation. So at that time, legislation created Texas boiler law, and boilers were required to be inspected internally and externally when they were installed and at subsequent intervals. So the extension law didn't come about until about 1963. So 1963, they came out and said, well, there's two types of boilers that can get an extension of that internal inspection. So keep in mind, the extension is only for the internal inspection. We still have to do that external inspection every year. Law requires it. So we only had two types of boilers in 1963 that were eligible for an extension. That's what we called a stationary boiler. It could get 24 months. And then an unfired boiler. That one could go up to 36 months or 3 years. But there was a couple things that we had to do in order to get that extension. First of all, we had to do continuous water treatment. So continuous water treatment, as you can see here in number 1, it's under competent and experienced supervision. And it has been in effect since the last internal inspection. But the purpose of it was to control and limit corrosion and deposits inside the boiler. So if that boiler is operating, it's creating deposits, and if there's too much oxygen in there, it can be causing pitting, you can cause corrosion, and the whole purpose of this water treatment was to prevent that, to control it and limit it. The other thing you had to do is you had to keep records. Well, there's a couple different types of records that we had to keep. The first set of records is water sampling. The law said that we had to do water sampling at regular intervals at all times when that boiler was running, not to exceed 24 hours. So that water sampling is taking a sample of the water out of the boiler and it's testing it to see how much what we call total dissolved solids, okay, or TDS. We want to make sure that we're controlling that inside. So what that TDS is once the water boils and these total dissolved solids come out, those deposits stay inside the boiler, and if they're left there, they can clog up the inside of the boiler. So that's why we want to control them. And obviously, we don't want any corrosion going on because that heats away the metal of the boiler and it can't hold the pressure. So that was another requirement. The second requirement for those records is we had to track when the boiler was taken out of service, why it was taken out of service, what repairs were required, who made the repairs, and the nature of the repairs. This was all original text from the original law back in 1963. And then finally, if the last internal inspection showed the boiler could be safely extended, which it always did, because if it didn't, it would have never got the first certificate of operation to begin with. And then that external inspection that was required to go on with it as well, if it showed the boiler could be extended, at that point the commissioner could determine at what length to extend the boiler. So, When did the law change? The first change came about in 1977. And this is where we extended unfired boilers from 36 to 48 months. We also added another type of boiler to that unfired group. That's waste heat boilers. The other thing we did is we said you no longer have to keep who made the repairs to that boiler. That was omitted from the law. That was the only changes in 1977. In 1981, we added an emergency extension. This emergency extension, what it did is after you ran out of the 24 months for that power boiler, that stationary boiler, and the 36 months for that unfired boiler, you could get a 120-day emergency extension to allow you to keep running for whatever purpose. You just had to follow a few rules. Request it and maintain the same rules or the requirements that we have for the regular extension. So in 89, we had another change, but there was really no changes in any of the verbiage. It was just the boiler law was recodified from Act 4A to what it is now, 755, Chapter 755. In 97, we had another change. We increased the number of months for that power boiler or that stationary boiler. This is when we actually started calling it, we went from calling it a stationary boiler to a power boiler. We increased it to 48 months. And then we actually increased unfired boilers to 84 months. This was a substantial jump. We also required one small thing that was pretty big at the time. During that external inspection, when it had to be completed, we now said that the gas regulator on gas boilers or the pressure reducing station has to be vented to a safe point of discharge, and that inspection had to be performed by the inspection agency when they did that external inspection. So we added something to what the inspector had to look at when he did his external inspection. In 1999, we added steam collection and liberation drums of process steam generators. This is the first time this type of boiler came into the extension provisions. It was added with the unfired boilers and allowed to go 84 months without, for an extension of that internal inspection. Then in 2003, we saw the biggest change that we've seen since the law was enacted. We moved power boilers from the 48 months to 5 years. We left unfired boilers at 84 months, but then we took those process steam generators that we had and we pulled them out separately and moved them out to 120 months or 10 years. And that's where we're at today, to some degree. So the last change that we had in the law was last year. And it was, again, with these process steam generators. So what we did is we took process steam generators that were fabricated prior to January 1 of 1970, and we left those at 10-year intervals. But we acknowledged that in the 1970s, when we started fabricating boilers in the 70s, we started using newer technology, newer materials, stronger materials, better technology, okay? And we determined that those process steam generators, they could go a little bit longer. So we added those to go out to 144 months, or 12 years. So we didn't want to not give the opportunity of those ones built prior to January 1970 to have that. So at that point, we added in a provision. If a registered professional engineer did a quantitative study in accordance with the NBIC or the National Board Document 23, if you did this life assessment of that vessel, you could get that extra 24 months, thus ending up with the 12 years that's allowed for the boilers fabricated after. You just had to prove that that boiler could stay safe to operate. So that brings us to where we are now with the law. As you can see, we have 60 months for power boilers, 84 months for unfired boilers, 120 for process steam generators fabricated before January 1, 1970, and 144 months for those fabricated after. Here, we have the interval can be extended if continuous water treatment under competent and experienced supervision to control and limit the deposits or the corrosion and deposits, and has been in effect since the last inspection. That's the exact same requirements from 1963. We also have, since the last internal and current external inspection, the boiler indicates it can be safely extended. Again, exact same requirements. Accurate and complete records that show since the last internal inspection, samples were taken, when the boiler was taken out of service, why it was taken out of service, the repairs that were made, and why those repairs were necessary. Again, exact same requirements. The law has not changed in any way other than extending the period that that extension can be given, adding that process steam generator, and then removing who had to maintain who actually made the repair to that boiler. Now we have this paragraph C that was brought back in the 80s. This is that emergency extension. So we've got the rules that the law has what you do for those emergency situations. C1, this is the registered professional engineer for that quantitative study of process steam generators that's fabricated prior to January 1, 1970. So, and that's the extent of the law as it is today. So what I've got here is a side-by-side comparison of what the law was in 1963 and what it is today. As you can see, we've got 24 months and 36 months for power boilers and unfired boilers. Here we've got 60, 84, 120, and 144. That shows our extension. Here we've got, at the beginning of the law, we say you have to have the continuous water treatment. Well, still at the beginning of the law, we say you have to have the continuous water treatment. You have to control the corrosion and deposits. You have to keep accurate records back in 63. Well, we still have to keep accurate records. Difference is here we have to keep the 24 hours water samples, but 24-hour water samples are over here in 2020. Sorry, wrong way. Down here it has to be every 24 hours. Over here it has to be every 24 hours. We still have to keep the records of the boilers was out of service. Nothing's changed. Everything still remains the same. Other than back in 1963, we didn't have provisions for an emergency extension. So now I want to do the same thing with the rules that we just did with the law. So with the law coming into effect in 1963, the first set of rules that I could actually find was actually from 1976. So back in the earlier days, the Texas Register didn't exist. And the programs that, or the agencies that regulated the programs, they maintained the rules. Well, I'm sure there's probably rules prior to 1976. I just couldn't find them. And the reason being is because the program, or the agency that regulated the program back in 1976 was the Department of Labor and Standards. So I don't have access to any of those records. So when the first set of rules that we found, there was only 3 requirements. The first requirement is the owner has to tell the department they want an extension. It's that simple. The second requirement is the agency tells the inspection agency that has jurisdiction for that boiler, hey, you need to go do the inspection. Do that external inspection. Then that inspection agency does the inspection and then sends that report back to the department. And if it's determined that the boiler can be extended, the certificate of operation is issued. Those are the only 3 requirements. Request it, send the inspector to go do it, get the inspection, and make the assertion of if it can be safely extended. So, changes that have happened since 1976. The first change came in 1977. The rules were changed to incorporate all the requirements that was in the law to be put in the rules. That's that 24-hour monitoring of water samples, when the boiler was taken out of service, why it was taken out of service, the repairs that were made. All those requirements were physically put into the rules. And then the very next 3 years later, 1988, they turned around and took them right back out and made it right back the way it was to begin with. And then in 1989, the rules were reorganized. This was pretty big for the regulation side of it because it messed up didn't mess up, it rearranged the numbers of where everything was at. So before, it was the extension rules was in 65103. With the reorganization, it was in 6520. So all our inspectors had to learn the new locations of where the rules were. The next change came in 1992. So boiler law was recodified from Act 4A to 755. So the rules had to change to go along with that. And we replaced the word user with the word operator. So instead of owner-user, it's now owner-operator. Then in 2014, the rules were reorganized again, and we went from 6520 for extension rules to 6563. And then in 2018, we went from 6563 to 6564 because we added other requirements, and it just got a little change in the structure. Other than that, the rules themselves did not change. So the current rules. Right now, we require no less than 30 days, no more than 60 days. The owner-operator has to notify the department. Then, the department notifies the inspection agency having jurisdiction and says, go do the inspection. Next, the inspection agency does the inspection prior to the expiration date of the current certificate of operation, and then they submit that report to us. And upon completion of those three requirements, if it's determined that it can be safely extended, it's extended. Now, we have a couple other side notes that says violations noted during the external inspection may be cause for denial. It may not be cause for denial. It just depends on the severity of the violation and if it can be fixed fairly easy. If the department denies the extension request, the boiler has to be inspected internally and externally. And then here we start talking about the additional 120-day extension rule, statutory requirement that came in the 80s. So that's added in. So here's a side-by-side comparison. As I mentioned, you have to request it. You have to request it. You have to have a statement that says you have everything that the law requires. Once it's requested, the department sends them out to go do the inspection. Once the inspection agency does the inspection and sends the department the inspection report and proves that the boiler can be safely extended, a certificate of operation is issued, along with whatever fees get taken care of. So again, the rules have not changed. No changes. It's been pretty stagnant since 1963 for the law and the rules. So in 1976, we didn't have any provisions for emergency extensions. We do now. These are the requirements for that. So I've been asked a couple of times, why do we need to make changes to the rules? There's nothing wrong with it, don't fix it. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that comment. The reason being is because over the many years, the way we build boilers and pressure vessels has changed. We've got new welding processes. We've got stronger metals. We've got new technology for operation of those boilers. We've changed the way we build them. We've changed the way we maintain them. We've changed the way we operate them. And because of that, we need to change the way that we regulate them. So that's why we need to have changes to the rules. We've incorporated process steam generators where they weren't there to begin with. We've gone from 24 and 36 months all the way to 5 years, 8 years, 10 and 12 years to allow that internal inspection. We've done that because of the way we changed the operation and because how we've made sure these boilers continue to operate safely. Another thing is the technology that the department uses to oversee the program. So in 2014, TDLR went to an online reporting system. Our inspectors and the authorized inspection agencies can actually go out to the field, conduct an inspection, and submit that inspection while they're on site through a web-based reporting system. We have that capability. Just last year, we opened up the capability for the owner-operators to request that extension online. So we don't need anybody to submit a request 30 to 60 days in advance to give us time to process it. We can actually process those requests within 10 minutes. There's no need for it to be there. We don't have to have the 60 days or the 30 to 60 days. We've changed the way we regulate the program. Again, with change, we need to keep our rules up to date. And that's pretty much it for this presentation. Yeah, I need to get one drink of water. That's a lot of words.
Okay, so Rob gave us a wonderful history of the law and rules. It was a great education. He's going to take a deep breath and get some water, and he's going to just plow into his next presentation of the proposed rules. I think he's ready. Oh, and what I've noticed about the boiler staff and boiler industry is they, no matter what it is, they start things really early, okay? They hit the road at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the mornings, and if we would have allowed it, Rob probably would have started this at about 7 a.m. But we started at 8, we're running smooth, we're on time, so Rob's going to come back up here.
Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I actually want to go over, we have a proposal, and I'd like to go over that proposal with everyone. So, before I start this, if anybody does not have a copy, they did not pick up a copy of the proposal, I would ask you to come up here and follow along with me. There is a difference between this proposal and the proposal that you see up here, and that is my comments. This proposal is how it would be published on the Texas Register. What is on the screen actually has some comments and some notes that I am making so we can discuss after we finish the presentation. First I want to make sure, can everybody read this? Do I need to make it a little bit bigger? Okay, is that better? Okay, so in the proposal, you're going to see a couple of different things. You're going to see words that are stricken through. Those are words that are going to be deleted, and then the ones that are underlined are new words for adoption. So the first thing we want to do is we want to define continuous water treatment. So earlier in my previous presentation, I talked about continuous water treatment and that its purpose is to control and limit deposits and corrosion. We want to create a continuous water treatment definition that says that this is a verifiable program that controls and limits corrosion and deposits in a boiler. That's what the intent of the law said. By doing this, this will give us the ability give the owner-operator the ability to determine how they control their water treatment. If they want to have a boiler that's they're controlling the corrosion by putting a nitrogen blanket on it, that's their decision. That's not the agency's decision. As long as that program prevents or controls and limits corrosion and deposits in the boiler, it meets the justification, or it meets the definition. We want to create two more definitions. One is the definition of a boiler in operation, which is a boiler's in operation when its energy source is applied. We also want to create a definition for a boiler that's out of service. A boiler that's out of service is not in operation, so it doesn't have energy applied, or it's in standby. And then finally, we need to create that definition for standby. So the definition for standby is a condition of a boiler in which an owner-operator has either, one, placed it into operation and at low fire. So this means the boiler's operating, but it's turned all the way back to where it's not really generating steam, it's not doing the job that it normally does. A lot of the operators call this hot standby, okay? Or two, it can be placed into operation within 48 hours. By doing this, and you'll see this later on, now owner-operators can actually have a boiler in standby mode and still be eligible for a certificate of operation through the extension program with just doing that external inspection. So this brings us to the majority of where the changes are. So this first part is we're saying we want to change it from 30 to 60 days to not less than 3 business days excluding holidays. We've got this new reporting system, this online permitting system that we utilize, and people can request that extension. We can have it processed in no time. All we ask is make sure we get the request when someone's here. By doing it within 3 business days, we're good. Someone will be there. One of the support staff will be able to come in the morning. If it's requested at midnight, they can pick it up in the morning and still be done. So this part right here, I'm actually going to highlight because it's stricken through. So it means these words are going to go away. But if you'll notice, paragraph A, B, and 2, I've got in the same colors. Reason being is because these words were taken out of this runoff sentence, and they're just put down here. So there's no real change. We're just putting in its own little paragraph. The other thing I want to talk about is we're talking about the desired length of the extension can be no more than 1 year. This is actually, it can only be less, it can't be more than 1 year because of the law. The law says in 755.025 that we have to do an external and internal every year. The extension is only the extension of the internal. That means that external still has to happen every year, and therefore that external inspection becomes a certificate inspection, and the certificate can only be issued until the next external inspection is due. So here, we used to say records available demonstrating compliance. What it says up here is that there's a statement certifying the records are available. You no longer have to make a statement saying the records are available. You just have to have the records. So right here, this is existing verbiage that we're going to take out. And the reason being is that currently it says, and the inspection agency has to submit the inspection. Well, Texas boiler law already says that the authorized inspection agency has to submit within 30 days of completion of the inspection report that is generated by the inspector. So the inspection agency law says that they have to send it within 30 days. If we have this here, it could actually kind of contradict each other. So here we've got violations noted during the external inspection. I talked about this briefly in my previous inspection. They may be cause for knowledge, they may not. It may or may not cause it. There's no need for this paragraph to be in here. So we propose removing it. So boilers for which the certificate of operation has expired must pass an internal inspection. This goes back to the law. Again, if you don't have a current certificate of operation, you're not eligible for an extension of the internal inspection. You have to comply with 755.025 and the fact that the boiler has to be inspected internally and externally. So paragraph B, this is where we get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Paragraph B, the interval between internal inspections may be extended at all times since the last internal inspection, or if at all times since the last internal inspection, continuous water treatment has been maintained. So we created a definition for continuous water treatment. That's now a program. So that owner has to figure out how they're going to limit and control corrosion and deposits. That's their program. So they have to maintain that. And the following. The boiler was in operation. So continuous water treatment and the boiler was in operation, or continuous water treatment and the boiler was in standby. So we created that definition for standby, and now owner-operators, if they don't have to have that boiler operating, they can still get that extension of the internal inspection as long as they're maintaining or limiting the corrosion and the deposits inside that boiler. So we go a step farther and say that if a boiler's in standby, you don't have to do water sampling. Well, the example I'm going to give you on this is we have a boiler that we're going to put in standby, and it meets the definition of continuous water treatment because they drain the boiler completely of water, and it has a nitrogen blanket in it. Right next to it is a storage tank that they can purge the nitrogen blanket and dump the water into the boiler. It only holds 500 gallons. They can do that in 3 hours with the pumps that they have, and then apply the energy source to the boiler. The boiler can be on within 48 hours. That boiler, they prepared it with a nitrogen blanket to prevent the corrosion. There's no water in it, so there's no deposits. So it meets the definition of the continuous water treatment. They can have it online within 48 hours, so it's readily available. So they still maintain the eligibility for that extension. So, but earlier we talked about in the definition of standby is a boiler can be at low fire and standby. Well, the problem with the boiler at low fire and standby, it's got water in it. It's creating steam, a small amount, but it's still creating steam. So it's boiling water. It's possibly causing corrosion. It's possibly causing deposits. So now we're going to say, notwithstanding B1A, which is B2A. That's a typo. I got to fix that. So notwithstanding B2A, so boilers that are in standby and in hot standby or in standby that's in operation, you still have to do that water treatment. Because there's water in it, it's creating deposits. It could be creating corrosion. So next we're going to say you can get your extension if the boiler was out of service for repairs for less than 15 days. So boiler breaks down, we go in, we fix the boiler, and we put it right back online. If it takes less than 15 days to do that, you're still eligible for an extension. The thought process from the department is that boiler is in operation, you guys are doing your job with it, and something happens. It breaks down. We're going to go in, we're going to fix it, and we're going to put it back online. During that time, an inspector cannot come in and safely and competently perform that internal inspection. It's not enough time. So the next one that we have is the boiler was out of service for repairs for periods exceeding 15 consecutive days. And accurate and complete records are available that show that boiler can be safely extended, or the internal inspection can be safely extended. So I kind of want to talk about this one. This one is that boiler's down for 15 days. 15 days, if that boiler is being entered and people are working on that boiler, in the agency's opinion, there's no reason an inspector cannot come in and perform that inspection safely and competently. So owners and operators have the ability right now, they can request an extension, they can take that boiler down, and they can take it down for repairs. Automatically, if it doesn't go over 15 days, they can get the extension without anything. If it goes more than 15 days, they're going to make the assumption that they have the records that are available to show the boiler can be safely extended. At this point, the agency, TDLR, and the inspection agency, their insurance company that's doing that inspection, they have no clue of what repairs are going on. They haven't been made aware of them. They have no details to ascertain if that boiler could be safely and competently inspected. Only the inspection, or only the owner-operator has that information at this point while that boiler's being down. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make is the law says in 755.026 that the department or the executive director and the inspection agency both have to approve the extension. If an owner-operator takes a boiler down, and it's down for an extended amount of time, and the inspection agency and the department is not notified of it, that owner-operator is making a business decision of whether they think it can be eligible for an extension without even consulting the two agencies that have the approval authority. And that leads into my next paragraph. And this is a new paragraph that nobody has seen yet other than here at the agency. It says, the interval between inspections may be extended for a boiler that has been out of service for repairs exceeding 15 consecutive days. However, there is a presumption that public health and safety concerns require that a boiler that is out of service for that length of time to have the required internal inspection. If an owner-operator of a boiler that has or will be out of service for periods exceeding 15 consecutive days who intends to request an extension, they should contact the agency, TDLR. Contact their authorized inspection agency, the other authority that has the approval authority by the statutory requirement. Let them know what's going on. Tell them the anticipated length of the repair. Give them the details of the repair, the nature of the repairs, the scope of work. Let the two communicate with the two agencies that have that authority to grant that approval at the time the boiler was down. Share that information with them. If you don't, you may be making a decision to put a boiler back online without doing that inspection, and then an inspector goes out to do that inspection, and he says, well, the boiler was down for 45 days. Why was it down for 45 days? Oh, we had to replace a water wall. Well, how come you didn't call me? I could have come in and did the inspection, and then that would have completely reset the internal inspection periodicity, where you've only got, because it's a power boiler, you only got 2 years left. Now it starts all over at 5 years. You got another 5 years you can go. That's what we're talking about here. That's what this notification is. The other thing I want to point out is this says should. It doesn't say you have to. It says you should. This is a business decision made by the owner-operator. They have to determine if they think that the agencies, the two agencies that have the approval authority, will agree with them or disagree with them. Until they reach out to those two agencies, they have no idea. So they're making an assumption that it would either be approved or not. So the other thing we have in here is you reach out to them, and then the agencies, inspection agency or TDLR, can actually reply with the given information about the outage or the repair. They can say, yeah, we still think you're eligible for an extension, and now they have a documented record showing that they're still eligible. Or they run the risk of saying, I'll tell them about it at the end of the cycle, and then we may have to shut down, we may not. But then, if they go forward with that and they have that documented approval from the agencies, if there is a major change in the scope of repair, they have to come back out and say, okay, things have changed, we had a failure of this, or hey, we're going to get up quicker, or we got to be down a little bit longer. What do you think? Okay? And that's this: update the department and the authorized inspection agencies if conditions change significantly upon the department's determination was based on eligibility for the extension of the interval between internal inspection has been preserved. So that brings us down to item D. The request for the extension of the interval between inspections may be denied for failure to comply with the applicable provisions of Texas Health and Safety Code 755, Texas Boiler Law, or this chapter. And then the rest of it is just current words with some editorial changes. So that's the entire proposal for the rules. But I want to go through some scenarios with y'all. I want to kind of give you guys the department's minds, or the department's thoughts on how this would play out. So the first scenario, we have boiler Texas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This boiler is a process steam generator. It's designated in standby. It's been drained of all water. They put a nitrogen blanket on it. They've got a tower sitting right next to it that if they have to put that boiler online within a certain amount of time, or any time at all, they've designated as standby, they can purge the nitrogen blanket, dump the water from the tower inside it, apply the energy source, and that boiler's now online. Will this boiler still get an extension? Is it eligible for an extension? What do you think? Anybody? The answer is yes. It's designated as in standby. It can be placed into continuous or into operation within 48 hours. And we have a program to prevent and limit corrosion and deposits. So we have that continuous water treatment. We've met all three requirements. So of course, in accordance with 6564B2, we meet the requirements and we're still eligible for an extension. No notification is needed to be made to anybody. You've designated the boiler in standby and you've done everything you needed to do. Scenario number 2. So we have boiler 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. This boiler is a power boiler. It has a blowing water tube inside the furnace. The operator shut the boiler down. They want to go inside, cool it off, replace the tube. So they're going to cut out a section about this big, put a new tube in, weld it in place, do a hydrostatic test. It's all going to be done in accordance with the NBIC, or National Board Inspection Code, which is what Texas Boiler Rule 65614 requires for repairs. But that boiler is only going to be down for 7 days. Go in, get the job done, get out, hydro test it, put it back online. Is it eligible for an extension still? Yes. Absolutely it is. It's going to be down for less than 15 days. We have a provision in there that says if it's less than 15 days, no questions, done. Still eligible. So let's go to scenario number 3. This one's a little bit more complicated. Boiler 123458. This is a waste heat boiler. It uses fumes of combustion from an incinerator that's installed across the street from it. So it's got this incinerator sitting over here. It's got a big old flue that comes up, goes into the back of the boiler, goes through 3 passes of the boiler, and then out the stack. Well, right there where that flue pipe goes into the back of the boiler, it's cracked all the way across the seam, and we've got fumes of combustion that are rolling out and rolling across the top of the steam drum, and it's causing that steam drum to get excessive temperatures. And now, because we've got those excessive temperatures, that metal is getting weaker. It's reaching its yield point. And we have a problem that the metal may not be able to contain the pressure that's inside the boiler because it's overheated. This repair is going to take, what do we say, a month? 4 weeks? That's a pretty substantial repair. In order to get an R-stamp company to come in and do the repair in accordance with 65614, it's going to take a lot of work. That boiler's going to have to be opened up. There's going to be a lot of work going on. We're going to have welders crawling in and out of the boiler. Will this boiler still be eligible for an extension? What do you think?
That could go both ways. Are you working under an internal inspection year? I mean, you done had it. You didn't ask for no extension yet.
You're right. So this is where, and you're exactly right, it could go both ways. This is where the operator should call the inspection agency and the department and say, hey guys, I've got this major repair going on. I'm going to have to shut the boiler down. I can either, as the operator, I can either make the business decision and say, you know what? How long do I got left on my certificate of operation? Well, we say 8 months in here. We still got 8 months left on the certificate of operation in my scenario. As an owner, I can say, you know what? I can either call the department and the inspection agency and say, hey, are you going to require me to do an internal inspection while this boiler is down, or will you deny or will you let me have the extension? In both cases, both of the agents, the authorized inspection agency and the department, will say, well, what's the details? Give me the details. Well, we're going to be going in and out of the boiler on a regular basis because welders got to go in there. They've got to replace this flue stack. It's going to be opened up on the internals. We're going to be crawling all over it, doing all kinds of repairs. And at that point, as the representative from the department that makes that decision, I'm going to say you have to do an internal inspection. There is no reason, because that boiler is going to be down for 30 days, and you're going to be crawling through that boiler, there is no reason within that time frame that inspection agency can send an inspector out there and safely and competently perform that internal inspection. Go ahead.
But I'm saying, Rob, if it expires in 8 months. So if I had an internal 4 months ago, you said I need to have another internal.
No.
Okay.
That's part of the information that goes along with what the inspection agency and the department makes a decision off of. If you're in a waste heat boiler, so this is an unfired boiler, if you're in the 7th year, I'm going to say no, get the internal inspection. If you're in the 1st year of it, you just had an internal inspection, yeah, we know it's good, go ahead. This is why the communication between the agency and the department and the owner is so vital. The agency, the inspection agency and the department are the ones that have the approval authority. If the decision is made to put that boiler back online without consulting with them, the owner is running the risk of having their extension denied. Just because no one shared any information with them. This is why we say in the rules that they should contact them. The law has always stated that it has to be the approval of the inspection agency and the department. Those are the two approving authorities. So in this particular scenario, I would say no, an extension would not be granted. Yes, sir.
So Rob, so what you're saying, so even if they get to the point of the certificate expired and they want another extension.
Hold on,
because they didn't
you're
finish-
getting ahead of my scenario. That's the next step of my scenario.
Never mind.
Okay? So the next question that I have is the extension's not going to be granted because the department feels that boiler's internal inspection can be performed safely and competently simultaneously with the repair. Does that mean you have to do that internal inspection right then and there? No. You still have a current certificate of operation that allows you to operate for another 8 months. If you choose not to bring that authorized inspector in and do that internal inspection, your current certificate of operation allows you to put it back online as soon as your repairs are done and go until the expiration date of the current certificate of operation. The problem you run is now you have to shut that boiler down again at the end of that expiration date and conduct that internal inspection, which means you have to open it back up, get your inspector back out, do the confined space entry, all that good stuff that goes along with it. Doesn't say that you can't do it. Doesn't say that you have to do it. The only thing the department is asking is that the owners and operators reach out to the department and the inspection agency and keep us apprised of the information that needs to know so we can tell you, yes, we'll either approve it or no, we don't. I will tell you in all cases, if the boiler can be safely and competently inspected, expectations of the department are that the boiler gets inspected. If it cannot, we will say, nope, you get the extension. Okay, and I've got another scenario that actually shows that. So scenario number 4, Texas 123459. This is a power boiler. It has gone 3 years into its extension, so it's got 2 years left. During the certificate and external inspection, they're getting an extension. During that external inspection, the inspector goes out there and he sees all the safeties leaking by. He says, hey, we got to replace those safeties. They're leaking. Can't have that. Owner says, no problem. We can take care of that. We got 5 valves back in the shop. We'll just take them off and replace them. Okay, cool. Go ahead. Oh, wait. So they used our valves. We don't have them. They're not there. What do we do now? Well, we can send those valves off to a repair shop, an VR repair shop, which is in accordance with the National Board Inspection Code and the repairs that we talk about over in 614. But it's going to take 4 weeks for those valves to be repaired. So we're going to take those valves off, we're going to ship them off to this valve shop, and they're going to be repaired, and they're going to send them back, and we're going to put them back on. Can this boiler get an extension? Maybe. What's the details? Are you going to do any repairs on that boiler while those valves are off? No. You're going to leave it full of water? Because we're full of water and we're not creating deposits. Because we're full of water, we don't have that air blanket in there, so we're not causing corrosion. So we're doing our continuous water treatment. We're not entering the boiler in any way, shape, or form. It's going to be shut down, but it's not going to be opened up. It's not going to be made to where it can be safely and competently inspected. And for that reason, I'll send you a letter and say, yeah, keep your extension. You're not opening that boiler up. It's not safe for that inspector to go in and do his job. In all cases, when it comes to the department, if the boiler cannot be safely and competently inspected, we will not expect the inspection to take place. We will maintain eligibility of that extension. So, Last thing is that it should be noted, Proposal 6564C is not requiring the owner or operator to notify TDLR. I've said that a couple of times. You're not required to do it. It says you should. If you want confirmation that you are still eligible for this boiler certificate or extension process, maintain eligibility for that extension. If you want to maintain that, it would be wise to reach out to the two authorities that have approval authority as stated in the law and say, hey, this is what we have. Are you going to let me maintain my eligibility? This is the scenario. And with that, that concludes my presentation, the proposal. And now we get to go into Q&A.
Almost.
Almost?
Almost.
Okay.
Almost. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, 10-minute break, so you can ruminate and think about your questions and comments. And if you decide to let us have it, that's fine too. Just come back at 10 minutes after 9. 10 minutes after 9. Okay, if we can get started, we're going to move into our question and answer, your comments portion of the summit. And I want to make it clear that after the comments are received, there's going to be a boiler board work group, or rules work group meeting to take the proposed rules, your comments, and work through them and discuss them and come up with a proposal for the board this afternoon. So, I mean, there's another step in this process. It's just not doing this summit and heading to the board meeting. There's going to be a board rules work group meeting in between. And depending on how long this lasts, that work group meeting could probably maybe start at like 10:30. So just to kind of give you some logistics of how we're going to handle this. Okay? So if you have a question, comment, whatever, let me know. I'll bring you the mic, and Rob will be up here to answer any questions or provide responses. So there we go.
I can talk loud.
I'll just give him this one, and then I'll take it back to answer.
If you'll state your name, please.
Tony Harden with Luminant Power, Vistra. So I've been in the power industry for 39 years now. I've been attending these meetings literally for decades. Just wanted to go through a few things. Obviously, from the history that he gave us, the power industry has an extensive and extended history of safe operation based on the extended extensions from 36 months to 60 months are allowable. I want to say that utilities in the state of Texas are having to compete like never before with solar power, wind power, and things like that. And so things have gotten more complex in the way that we start up, shut down. There's all sorts of reasons that we may be down for 5, 10, 15 days that may have nothing at all to do with repairs of our boilers. All utilities have outage seasons. They tend to be in the spring and in the fall to avoid summer and winter, which is when our extreme weather occurs. And that's when we do welded repairs. We do our inspections, which tend to be very, very detailed inspections, but that's also when we do our certificate inspections, whether we're doing just an external with an extension or doing internal and externals. Even if we do repairs and only do an external, our repair organization has to inform their AI that we're doing, their authorized inspector, that we are doing welded repairs. So to say that we're not informing that we're doing repairs, I think is not quite true, because we do have to make contact with an authorized inspector that we are doing welded repairs at all time, every time we do that. I feel like this is adding complexity to a system that was relatively simple. Basically, the rules say that annually we have to do an internal and an external inspection unless we apply for an extension. That's it. There are no other rules. There's nothing in there that says there is an expectation that if I'm down for more than 15 days that I have to contact the state or my AI and let them determine whether or not I have to go into my boiler or not. And what folks need to understand is that when you do an internal, you have to open up every door and every hole in that boiler. And for a lot of these plants, that's a very expensive process. We encourage each and every plant each year, if they have the time, to go ahead and do the internal to extend that clock. It doesn't always work that way. But traditionally, like I said, we have our planned outage seasons. Most plants either have their outages in the spring or fall. So let's say I have a fall outage and I do an internal in November, and then for some reason in January or February, we have an extended outage. The way I understand, I've got to notify the state, and they may make me go in there and do another internal, even though I've got a year, and I've literally got a year plus the potential for 60 months. He may make me go in there and do another internal. Let's say he does. That resets my clock to the next January or February. Even though I have fall outages, now I've got to have some sort of a special outage or keep paperwork and make sure that I notify the state and do an external to get my clock reset to my normal fall outage season. And I don't know if you're catching this, but this adds a level of complexity to the plants that is, I hate to say, but ridiculous. They've given no reason safety-wise to have to do this. I think we're adding complexity to a system that has worked very well for no reason at all. And that's all I have right now. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, so I want to address both a couple of things here that you said. So you said when you're making repairs, you have an authorized inspector. You're correct. You do have an authorized inspector, but that authorized inspector is not the authorized inspector that represents your authorized inspection agency that's doing the internal inspection or the certificate inspection, for that matter, on behalf of the state. That is the authorized inspector that works for that R stamp holder. He is not looking at anything other than straight only the repair that's being made, that's being done by the work that's being done by that R stamp holder. Okay, total different credentials. That R stamp inspector most likely may not even have an in-service Texas commission and be eligible to conduct an in-service Texas inspection. Okay, so to say that you already have an authorized inspector looking at it, it's not a true statement. It's different inspector, different credentials, not in the same realm. Okay. The other thing I'm going to say is as you can see up here on the law, it says with the approval of the executive director and the inspection agency that has jurisdiction, the interval between the internal inspections may be extended. It doesn't give any details. The law says the inspection agency and the executive director has to approve it. Okay? There's nothing that says any ifs or whys. The only thing that we're asking over here in our information or our proposal is we're saying, let me get down to paragraph C, that you should reach out to us. We're not saying you have to. We're saying if you want to have that warm, fuzzy feeling that you know you're going to maintain eligibility, that you should let your inspection agency, who has the approval authority, the department, who has the approval authority, to be able to tell you whether or not they can say that, yes, we will maintain the approval authority. You'll maintain that eligibility. I'm not trying to get into anybody's business. I'm trying to help you be able to make the decision or the business decision to be able to do that.
We already have that ability. Without changing that rule, we already have that ability right now. Why are we adding this? Why are we adding, that one doesn't work. With the existing rules, we already have that ability, Rob. Why are we adding rules to something that we already have? Right now, I apply for an extension, we notify you, we maintain our water chemistry, you say yes or no, we have that ability without this complication.
I do not agree with that statement, and here's why. You request your extension. You had your boiler down for 4 weeks. It was down for repairs. You request your extension, we know nothing about it. We send a letter pending approval. It says it may be extended. Your inspector comes out and conducts that external inspection. While he's reviewing those water treatment records that are required to be done every 24 hours, he notices that there's 4 weeks of time where no readings were taken. He says, why were there no readings taken? The answer is we were down for repairs. Okay, well, what were the repairs that we did? Now you are telling us after the fact what repairs were made, and it is up to the discretion, in accordance with the law, if that will be approved or not. The only thing we're asking is for you guys to tell us about it up front so we can say, you know what? Yeah, we can't competently and safely inspect that boiler. So you maintain your eligibility, and now you can make your business decision. Or we say, no, that boiler can be competently and safely inspected while those repairs are being made, and that inspector should be allowed the opportunity to do that inspection. And now you, as the business owner, makes the business decision of either I'm going to bring my inspector in and do that inspection, reset that 10-year clock, that 5-year clock, whichever type of boiler it is, or we don't have the inspector come in, we start the boiler back up, and we know that we're going to have to shut it back down at the end of the year or when the certificate of operation expires.
Okay, I want to make it clear that the board members can weigh in here, comments, questions, whatever y'all want to do. So if y'all want to weigh in here, go ahead. Anybody?
Sorry.
Tony, you have another one?
Yeah. So records have always been available. It has always been a requirement. An authorized inspector can always come in and should always review our records. So I almost feel like I'm being threatened when it says we should, and if I don't and I get to the fall and I haven't, and you find out that we've had an outage for whatever reason, and then like I said, we may have units that are down for weeks at a time for nothing other than normal competition. And during that time, we may have opened a single door to go into a boiler for refractory repair. We may not have opened up a pressure part. And I feel like I'm being threatened that if I don't notify you that I was down for 4 weeks, that you'll force me to do an internal. And again, the existing law has none of that expectation in there other than I have to do an internal and an external each and every year unless I apply for an extension. And as long as I've maintained my records, I should be able to get that extension. And again, you're adding complexity, and I feel like a veiled threat that if I don't inform you, and I would say, who is going to review all these records? The most qualified people you have are the AIs that come out and do those inspections and review those inspections, review those records at the plants during those inspections. And at that time, if they have questions, we're there to answer those questions and potentially even supply more records to answer those questions. Whereas simply sending a note to the state saying we were down for 4 weeks, we did this, we want to maintain our eligibility for an extension, gives you no real data about what we're doing or why we're doing it.
So I agree, that authorized inspector is the person that reviews those records. But on a regular basis right now, I get phone calls from authorized inspectors that says, Rob, I'm reviewing these records and the boiler was down for repairs for 6 weeks. We could have done the inspection. And at that point, when the inspection could have been done, the expectation of the law is that the boiler would be inspected internally. Okay, hold on, let me finish. So the other part you're talking about is you shut the boiler down on a regular basis, you said, for competition reasons. Okay? Our proposal is the boiler shut down for repairs, not for competition reasons. You have the boiler in standby, you've got it sit there and ready. Okay. That boiler's not shut down for repairs. The only thing we're talking about is if that boiler is down and repairs are being made, And that boiler, while those repairs are being made, can be safely and competently inspected by a TDLR commissioned in-service inspector. Expectations are is that 755.025 are complied with. That's the expectations of the law. The extension provision is an extension of the internal inspection. It's not a guaranteed. It may be perceived as that, but the law is very clear. It says, with the approval of the authorized inspection agency and the executive director. Both agencies have to approve it. It's not an automatic approval. The only thing the department wants to do is to ensure that that boiler, if it could have been inspected competently and safely, that it will be.
Are you saying they haven't been competently and safely inspected for the past 60 years?
That's not what we're trying to say. The law requires internal and external inspection. Under the provisions for the extension, only the external inspection takes place. Because the law requires internal and external. If an internal can be competently performed and safely performed, it should be. That's all we're saying. Under the extension, that internal inspection for the last 37 years, 57 years, that internal inspection didn't take place. But if it could have been competently and safely inspected, it should have taken place. That's what we're saying.
Okay, let's get another question from over here.
My name is Alex Schmucker with XL Energy. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think these proposed changes are necessary. They add complexity to a already very simple and straightforward law and rules. And as far as repairs go, when we go into a boiler and make a tube repair, we are on the fire side of the boiler. An internal inspection requires a fire side and water side inspection. A lot of times we do not open up the water side. The water side opening would require opening steam drums or mud drums. There are specialized gaskets involved with these doors, manpower involved, and when you go back together with it, sometimes the gaskets don't always seal, which causes a leak at the door, which would require us to shut the unit down one more time and replace this gasket. And that is unnecessary also.
So I agree. I completely agree with your statement. But I will offer this. If you're down for repairs, and this repair is only on the fire side, that boiler can't be safely and competently inspected because the water side's not open. Therefore, when you send me this notice and say, hey, Rob, we're going to be down for 6 weeks, but we're only working on the fire side, we're not opening up the water side, I'm going to turn around and say, so the boiler can't be safely and competently inspected, you still maintain eligibility. All we're asking for is communication. That's all we're asking for. We want to know that if that boiler can be safely and competently inspected, that it will be. The expectation for health and safety is that it will be. 755.025 requires that internal and external inspection. 026 is the extension of the internal only. And it has to be approved by the inspection agency and the department. Nowhere in the law or rules does it say for what reason it's going to be denied or what reason it'll be approved. But the stance that the department has is if the boiler can be safely and competently inspected, it should be.
Every time we have that opportunity to safely inspect both sides, fire side, water side, we will take that opportunity to extend that 5-year clock, reset the clock, so to speak. That we will take that opportunity every chance we get, and not necessarily based on a repair cycle or a repair that's taking place, or if the unit was down for 15 days or more. I mean, if we have that opportunity, we will take it.
And that's what we're asking. But we want you guys to be able to make that business decision to say, okay, the state says that it can be safely and competently inspected. You still got 8 months left on that certificate of operation. It's your business decision of whether you do that inspection right then or not. or if you wait to the end of the expiration date of the current certificate of operation. We just want to be able to tell you, hey, you're maintaining your eligibility, or I'm sorry, we don't see it that way. We're not going to approve it. We have the authority to say we're not going to approve it because we feel it can be safely and competently inspected. Again, communication. There are three entities in this scenario that have to be able to talk to each other. You have the owner-operator who's operating the equipment. The inspection agency has the approval authority in accordance with statutory requirements. The department has approval authority in accordance with statutory requirements. If we get communication between those three entities, it won't be no problem. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what the expectations are. We want you to get your extensions. And I'll tell you right now, every extension that has ever come across my desk, every one of them I have said yes to. The only time that anything ever gets denied is when that boiler can be safely and competently inspected. Once you find out the details of the repair, which is what we're talking about, we're only talking about downtime for repairs. You've got someone going in that boiler to make a repair. That's the only time we're talking about.
Okay, anybody else?
Hello, William Nipper, Dow. Just for some level setting, we run assets, petrochemical facilities. We don't ever shut down. We run as much as we possibly can. We don't have some of the issues that other companies have mentioned. We have somewhere around 100 process steam generators in the state, so we have quite a few. And just a few questions for you, Rob. I guess the scenarios you outlined, the four prior, what you're suggesting is today, the way the rules and the laws are set up today, there would be no options or no flexibility with the four scenarios you mentioned earlier.
For the
Extensions.
way it's written right now, if the boiler was taken down, they could be denied regardless.
All right, so
The standby scenario doesn't even exist today.
okay. So what you're suggesting is that in those four scenarios and a lot of the other standby type scenarios, there's now significantly more flexibility built in than what there is today.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good enough. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Andrew Shrewbar, Lower Colorado River Authority. I'm going to probably have a little simpler question, but I kind of want to hear for the record, I know how we do business now. We do, when we want an extension or whatever, we got our inspection agency in the loop. Basically, we have that contact's name. Right now, it's several names we have to copy to let them know what we need. And in the meantime, it's a requirement for anything that we're down for. We got to let them know. So I think what you're proposing makes it a little easier on our end. But as far as when you notify the TDLR, I know you're here right now. Is there a specific website or address that we would send this, to let you know what's going on? Now, Rob, I got your email address from past emails. And right now you're in position to say yes or no. But for the record, for the rules, is there be a certain place to send that email or the notification?
Yes, sir. So instead of sending those directly to me to get confirmation or to maintain eligibility, we have a group email that's boilers@tdlr.texas.gov, BOYLERS. That is where everybody used to send the extension request. When we did them by paper, any variance request, all that stuff, that is a group email. It's monitored by Gloria and Brittany on every day that we're at work. If I'm out, whoever I leave in charge, those emails would be forwarded over to that person, and that person would be able to make a decision. So the point I'm going to make here, guys, is in every scenario that you come at me with, if you can show me where that boiler is not safely and competently inspected, you will maintain your eligibility. That is the only criteria that I go by. The inspection needs to be done in accordance with Texas law, and if it's safe for that boiler inspector to go in and he can competently inspect it, I want him to do it. If it's not, eligibility is maintained at all cases, across the board. All my inspection specialists know that. We're all on the same page. We've talked about this numerous times. So if you send an email to boilers@tdlr.texas.gov saying, here's my scenario, and it shows that boiler cannot be safely and competently inspected, you can guarantee the reply is going to be, you will maintain your eligibility from the department. I can't make the decision for the AIA, but I can make the decision for the department.
Current law says that we have up to 60 months for power boilers and 84 months for unfired.
Yes, sir.
Under what scenario would we be allowed to go the full 60 months then? Because we will have outages every year, and we will go into those boilers every year. So if current law allows us 60 months, 5 years, it sounds like there is no possible scenario where you would allow us to go that full length of time as current law allows.
So you're telling me you go into your boilers and do your own inspections every year during shutdowns? So then I don't understand why you're even requesting an extension then, because under that, hold on, under that scenario, if your people are going in and doing that internal inspection, then the authorized inspector should be going in and doing that inspection as required by 755.025, which is the parent law.
I don't disagree with that, Rob. But our option is that we have up to 60 months to extend as long as we maintain a safe boiler, we maintain our records, we maintain our water chemistry. What is the purpose of 60 months of extension if you're, and your Dow asked about options, you're taking away our business decisions and our business options. Again, it costs a lot of money to go through one of these Hercigs that has 3 drums to open all those holes for an internal inspection. Again, typically, if we have that option, we will tell them to do that. Sometimes they can't, but you may say, wait a minute, you're in there, you've opened one drum, open up the rest of them so that we can come in and do an internal inspection. I don't understand why you are taking away our business decisions when current law says we have up to 60 months. And I don't know of any case where we've ever done that. I don't know, but current law says we have up to 60 months.
So let me back up. You're going in and doing an internal inspection. You said you're only knocking in one drum. You're not doing a full internal inspection. When you're doing what you're going and doing your analysis, you're going in and checking certain parts of it. You're not doing, are you doing the entire internal inspection?
Oh, I don't know. That's just an example.
So the example I'm going to give you is if you're doing a full internal inspection, your authorized inspection agency is going to want to do that internal inspection with them because they're providing the policy, and you should be reaching out to them to request approval from them. Just because it's in the law doesn't mean it's guaranteed. It still has to be approved by the department and the inspection agency. Always has been. But if you're going into only parts of that process steam generator or that power boiler, you're only, say, kicking in the steam drum, you're not going in the mud drum, a full internal inspection cannot be competently and safely inspected. I will always go back to those 2 requirements and those 2 requirements only. A competent inspection that shows that boiler is safe to operate internally, and it is safe for that inspector to go in to do that inspection.
So we currently have that ability right now, again, without having to notify the state. We have to notify the state each and every year that we're going to do an internal or an external or both. We already have that communication. You're adding the complexity to each and every plant, each and every unit that they now have to track every year. Plants that traditionally have fall outages, it may fall in the middle of the summer now because they come down and have to do something and you say, it's been 3 years, I want you to do an internal. That means their next internal is by the next summer instead of the fall like they have to right now, which means they have to do extensions or something to get back to their normal outage, or we'll be forced to come down at an earlier time, an unplanned time, which is a business decision for us. We already have to communicate with the state. We already have to communicate with our AIs. We communicate very closely with our AIs. You're adding complication to a system that doesn't need to be added to.
I don't agree with that statement.
Are there safety reasons, Rob? Have there been accidents? Why are we doing this?
As I said in my presentation, as time changes, as we change the way programs are administered, as the way the boilers are operated changes over these times, our rules have to change with it. We become stagnant. There has not been any substantial change to any of the laws or the rules since they were created.
Except for
You're-
the periods have gone from 36 months to 60 months, which is, in my mind, proof that we run safe operations. We don't need to change rules just for just to change rules.
Again, the law says internal and external inspection annually. The extension is only if it's approved by the department and the authorized inspection agency. I'm sorry, I don't agree with your statement. I don't see where it's adding complexity. All I see is where it's adding communication between the three people that matter the most in these boilers: the owner, the inspection agency, and the department. The inspection agency and the department are the only ones that have the approval authority. And as I've told you, in every case, as long as that boiler can be competently inspected and safely inspected by that inspector, that's the only time we're going to require it to actually take place. And when I say competently, I mean all the handholds opened up, the low water fuel cutoff lines, plugs taken out, the drums kicked in on the steam drum, the mud drum, the burners opened up if we're going into the firebox. We're looking at the firebox, we're looking at the mud drums, we're looking at the water drums, we're looking in the tubes, we're looking at everything. And if everything can be seen, then it can be competently inspected. If that inspector can go into it safely, he can go in and do it. There's no reason he can't. And for that reason, we should always go back and comply with 755.025.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody on the board?
So I guess this is Dan Lancaster, AEP. I guess I have a couple of comments. In your presentation, you talked about New London, and that was horrible, horrific. Never want to repeat that.
Lee, can you give Mr. Lancaster?
I thought he was hot.
Hello.
It doesn't sound like, okay. I can barely hear him.
I need to get closer then. So anyway, New London was horrible, horrific. That's what started this process, 37. So I've studied it a little bit, and I've actually talked to a survivor many years ago. But it was not caused by a lack of internal. It was a fuel, it wasn't the boiler that blew up, it was a fuel explosion. Horrible, horrific, but an internal the week before wouldn't have done anything. External, yeah, because they had a fuel leak for a long time. So, but I hear what he's saying is that, and anytime you disturb something, you could cause a leak. So you've taken people away from what they could be doing on working on the balance of plant, because you've only got a certain number of people, a certain amount of time. There's additional cost, additional complexity. You've taken their minds off of what they could be doing. Now we're doing an internal that may not be necessary. We're not doing it now, but we do. Power boilers, the utility industry, we want we want these units to operate safely, and a few years between internal inspections is probably still safe. It's been we've been doing it for 60 years. The last thing we want to do is have an issue, but steam is dangerous. But we're not really having these types of issues. Sometimes it's stress corrosion cracking that you're not going to find in internal. These leads. So there's a lot of things that we could do, but knocking in the doors isn't going to help a lot of the issues that we have. But we have employees being hurt, driving golf carts, driving trucks, you're taking time, and then other equipment in the plant. There's lots of steam leads that aren't covered by the boiler. There's lots of equipment out there, and anytime we're doing something that hasn't been found to be necessary, you're taking us away from what other inspections, other work that could be done. Does that make sense?
Respond to that?
Sure, I guess you're in
Go
charge.
ahead.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So, I agree. That's why we're saying if the boiler can be competently and safely inspected. Okay? If that boiler is already open, if you yourself as the owner are going through the entire boiler and doing an internal inspection, I don't understand why you have a problem with the authorized inspector going in and doing the inspection with you, thus bringing the boiler into compliance with Texas Boiler Law 755025. You're already inside the boiler. Your authorized inspector can be in there with you. Now, if you're not doing a full internal inspection, he's not going to competently inspect that boiler, and therefore he shouldn't do an inspection. Eligibility for that extension will be maintained. If he can't safely go inside that boiler, eligibility for that internal inspection will be maintained. The whole premise to this is if you guys are going in your boiler yourselves, explain to me why we cannot comply with the law and have that internal inspection performed by the authorized inspection agency.
I'm sorry, one last point. A lot of times, we'll get into an outage, and it may have nothing to do with the boiler. We'll get into, 5, 10, 15 days, and someone comes up and says, hey, we need to go do this. And so we open the boiler. One of your assumptions is that, let me ask you this, how many assets are there in the state of Texas?
55,000.
55,000 assets. So our AIs are hitting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those each year. They are not at our beck and call. And for us to get towards the end of an outage and have to go into a boiler and then have to decide whether we're going to do an internal or not, part of that is getting hold of an AI that can come meet our schedule. That is not always possible. We currently, we work, and I'll just say we work with FM Global, fabulous company. And we've got assets all over Texas, just like these other folks do. We have planned outages that they know of now for the next several years. And when we change those outages, we let them know. What they don't know is our unplanned outages, because we don't know our unplanned outages. There are times when we've called and they've said, we just don't have anyone available. So for us to jump in the middle, and there are other business reasons than us not wanting to go in and open everything up. And for us to wait a day or two or three in this competitive market because we can't get an AI in there is, that's, to me, that's just unfathomable.
That's part of the communication. If an authorized inspector is not available, if Norm Anderson can't get one of his inspectors, if he's your authorized inspector and he can't get one out there, that's part of the communication between the three parties. You can't competently and safely inspect that boiler.
But again, we already make those communications with our AI. Why are we having to add more communication to what we're already doing?
Because the agency also has the responsibility of approving it.
Then to me, then you need to be talking to the AIs. What you're doing, again, is adding communication responsibilities to each and every plant that they have to track these outages now and inform you each and every time. You're adding the complexity that if we do have the outage, that they have to do an internal inspection. Now that resets that clock to wherever that is, which is away from where they normally do, which adds complexity the next year to make sure that they maintain that, because if they miss that and they lose their certificate, then we have to do an internal.
I'm not requiring anybody contact us. I'm saying you should. And if your inspector can't get out there, it's a simple email to boilers@tdr.texas.gov. We wanted to do our inspection, but our inspection agency doesn't have anybody. They're CC'd on the email. Everybody knows. There's no one available to safely and competently inspect that boiler. I'm going to go back to that every single time. If the boiler can be safely and competently inspected, expectations are that 755.025 required internal and external inspections should be maintained. That's the law.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
William Nipper, Dow, once again. So just to kind of build on your point and some of the other points, just for, I guess, clarification. Rob, what you're, I guess, suggesting is today as it's written, I'd have to go into a boiler potentially because there's no exceptions or exclusions or anything that would allow me to just say, no, I don't have to. Say I'm at 3 days. 3 days today, I may have to go in. Obviously, every situation is different. What you're offering from a safety standpoint is potentially that as long as it's less than 15 days, we don't have to go in, extension can still be valid. Is that?
No questions asked.
No questions asked.
Less than 15 days, no questions asked.
So-
You don't have to tell me. In fact, you don't even have to tell your authorized inspection agency.
Okay. So you don't have to tell your authorized inspection agency. So potentially, to some of the other points, there is the potential that there's less AI work, at least for my particular situation, because they don't have to come out when, as of today, they would, based on what you have proposed.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then that also, from a safety standpoint, potentially keeps people from having to go do work that they would have today otherwise had to go do.
Under the way the law is right now, and I get these phone calls on a regular basis, the authorized inspector will go do the external inspection. No one's been told anything about the downtime of the boiler. They will start reviewing the past history records that are required to be maintained. They'll look at those, they'll see that the boiler's been down for 60 days. They will say, why was the boiler down for 60 days? And the owner will say, we had people working in the boiler, it was down for repairs. No one was notified by all right at that point. The department and the inspection agency has the authority to deny that extension right then and there. We haven't done it, but it has the authority. Our premise is if the boiler can be safely and competently inspected, it should be.
And just as one other clarification, so do you think that, given the scenarios that you've mentioned, that it potentially keeps scaffold builders and operators and other people safe because they don't have to go in as frequently as they would based on today's standards?
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks.
Brian Malin, Boiler Property Consulting. As an AI, I constantly go and, get questions asked by, power plants, DuPont, Dow, all the different major contributors. And the one thing that I think that we're missing, because we're hounding on the one portion of this law or this rule change, which has to do with the repairs, is this also is going to allow places to go and do standby and other forms of not using the boiler without having to necessarily give up their right to an extension. Because currently, it's kind of a very gray area when it comes to the boiler not operating and not being under repair under the current law without having these rule changes. Because say Rob wasn't here and it was somebody else, and they decided that standby was just as being as much as repair, and he could automatically deny every single location an extension requirement because standby is not in the rules. You understand? Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
We're getting ready to wrap this up. Anybody else?
Good point. So, the other thing I want to point out here is I want to remind you guys, when you're out there and you're down for your boiler repairs, and say the department says we're not gonna maintain eligibility. That boiler was going to be down for 60 days, and there's just no reason it can't be safely and competently inspected, and we're not going to maintain eligibility. If your certificate of operation is good for another 12 months or another 10 months, 11 months, you can still operate that boiler out up until that expiration date. You can schedule an outage at a different time throughout that time. You're just not going to maintain the eligibility of that internal inspection at that time. But again, at all times, if the boiler cannot be safely and competently inspected, you will maintain the eligibility from the department. The only thing the department cares about is safety.
Okay. Anybody else?
Rob, when are these draft proposal rules, when are they going to be brought up to be talked about?
I'm sorry?
When are they going to be brought up? When are y'all going to negotiate whether you're going to move forward with them or not?
Okay, after this summit, the board rules work group will get together and discuss everything that we've heard from everybody, as well as the proposed rules and Rob's presentation, and come to a consensus. So, I mean, there's a rules work group step before it ever gets to the boiler board. Just so happens the boiler board is this afternoon, okay? But the work group's going to look at it before the board meeting. All right. I thought we were done. This is our Assistant General Counsel.
Laura Pefferly with the General Counsel's Office. I just want to remind everyone that at the board meeting, there's opportunity for public comment. So if you think of something that you didn't bring up here, you'll have a chance to add that. The board won't be able to have discussion with you two-way, but you can certainly bring up anything you forgot or that occurs to you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. All right. The work group is going to convene at 10:30?
What time is it?
10?
Yeah, let's give the work group, those that's on the work group, Tony, you're invited to come up too. I'd like to meet up in the Veterans Training Room. The Veterans Training Room is on the 3rd floor of this building on this side. When you get off the elevator, which is right over here, when you get off right on the right-hand side, there will be a glass door. If you knock on that glass door, they'll let you in and you can sign in and they can show you where the training room is. I'll be around too, and we'll be in there as well. So, thank you.
All right. Thanks for your participation.